Hi, my name is Gary Potter. I'm founder of Deal Valuation and GNC Capital Solutions. Today I want to introduce and dive into the subject of convertible debt and preferred equity. For over 30 years, I've modeled and valued investments in convertible notes and preferred equity for family offices and private equity firms. These valuations are always reviewed by their accounting firms, including the Big Four, tax authorities, and our PE and family office clients. For more information on my background, please see the end of the presentation. Working with private equity level investors, I've learned a lot about the use of multi-class capital structures to lock in liquidation preferences while providing upside returns. During more volatile markets, provisions to guarantee minimal returns are typically increased, accumulating dividends, 2x or 3x factors, or maybe deep discounts to the next round of financing in convertible notes. This presentation introduces multi-class capital structures and the models used to value them. In the presentation, I'll start with a quick overview of how to examine the value of a business, the different layers of capital structure used to fund most companies, and then dive into the effects of convertible debt and preferred equity classes in the allocation of future sales proceeds, referred to as the equity waterfall. We'll then go into some of the methodologies used to value these instruments, including a methodology I developed called the discounted future proceeds method. It's a weak definition, but a business is a group of stuff that makes positive cash flow. Invested capital is the market value of all debt and equity of a business. Typically, companies are purchased at the TIC or total invested capital level, as it eliminates past legal relationships with investors, bankers, and tax authorities. The TIC of a business can include working capital, tangible and/or intangible assets, and goodwill. Capital refers to the spectrum of debt and equity used to fund a business. This includes classes with senior and subordinate positions throughout the debt and equity structures, with the direct relationship between risk and seniority, sometimes referred to as preference, while bank or term debt is typically secured by cash flow or assets. Preference provides the only layer of protection thereafter, while optionality offers high-risk rewards. Common is the typical level of value used in public stock exchanges, while convertible notes and preferred are the chosen instruments of the venture capital and private equity world, given the combination of preference and optionality. Mezzanine debt and safes, or simple agreements for future equity, provide preference to a return of the investment while not implying the value of the equity, which can be important during critical growth phases between investment rounds. These instruments also typically include upside potential through conversion or participation rights. Conversion mechanisms include automatic and optional levers. Typically, the note is forced to convert if a new class of equity is sold and a stated amount or more is raised. Also in an IPO. A discount on conversion is also common. As an example, a 20% discount on conversion provides a built-in 25% return. Assuming $100 note and a $1 conversion, the note holder will receive 125 shares versus the 100 shares without the discount. A safe is a very similar instrument. However, it's not debt. No maturity, no interest typically, paid after the term debt, but before preferred in a liquidation. Safes typically include discounts on conversion and can include many other types of built-in returns, as they are not equity or debt. Again, if you see a 1.5 to 3 times return required as part of the safes, be on guard. Volatility is likely. Here are some of the typical differences, including some geographic-based differences. Stop to review if you'd like. Preferred equity includes debt-like components that are built into the corporate organizational documents. The articles of incorporation or LLC agreements. The debt-like component is the preferential return of the investment made plus the interest in a liquidation or sale of the business. This priority over common stock reduces the risk of the investment and can bifurcate the desires of the two classes of investors in future business decisions. It is also the only way to raise millions or billions when high growth and large losses require bigger investments to chase unicorn outcomes. Private equity portfolios typically need a 20% plus return for partners to make real money. These instruments provide locked-in downside with upside potential referred to as optionality or equity kickers. The combination of preference and optionality are the key elements in achieving the 20% return required. That and smart investing. With liquidation rights like debt, but after debt, and equity returns like common possible, preferred is more risky than debt and less risky than common investments. Let's see how these terms play out in the waterfall. The distribution of proceeds in the sale of a business is based on legal agreements. The terms used in each instrument drive the priority and the amount paid to each. For convertible notes and convertible preferred, the participation comes in stages. As shown, preferred may get their investment back before common participates, tranche 2, but then waits to participate in the upside return until common receives some amount. This is called a convertible preferred. If this was a participating preferred, the preferred stock would start accumulating value with the common immediately, in tranche 3 in the example. In the waterfall, each tranche of participation reflects the rights and preferences of the class and the points at which participation changes. Structure could get any more complicated. For instance, this is a real capital structure. You can feel the anxiety, right? Where do you think the investors are located? Leave your answer in the comments and I'll send you something. Let's go through an example. For this example, I've included 2 layers of preferred and common stock. Series B has preference over Series A. The preferred are convertible preferred. No dividends or other special liquidation rights to the preferred are included. To understand the flow, I've presented a shortened version of a typical allocation in an asset sale. Any proceeds first go to pay off outstanding working capital claims and term or bank debt. The remainder goes through the equity waterfall. The waterfall is driven by priority and 2 types of payout, those based on value and those based on shares. Value-based payouts include the fixed dollar liquidation preference, accumulated interest, or dividends, or other preferential amounts like milestone or threshold-based kickers. Share-based tranches reflect pro rata participation in tranches typically driven by the change in the per share values for common or common equivalent as preferred converts or options exercise. The participation shown at the bottom is a typical allocation when preferred is included with liquidation preference of convertible notes, replacing tranche 1 if outstanding, and options and warrants adding to the right side shares-based tranche count as different exercise price points are achieved. As shown, if the total proceeds to equity is below 30, only the preferred classes will be paid. And for the Series B to participate in the upside, the value allocation must exceed 100. The waterfall is helpful to understand the impact of the liquidation rights. However, modeling out specific proceeds is the only way to see how common will be impacted by the conversion rights of preferred and convertible notes. In this example, the $100 value allocated pays common $1 while we're returning only $1 to the Series B. Now let's compare this with a couple of extreme examples to examine the impact of these rights. Above $100, everyone gets the same, and all the world is right. Series A invested earlier, was subordinate in preference to Series B, and was paid a higher return at 125. 50 cents invested, 125 returned. If the allocation was December 2025, the compounded annual return, or CAGR, which should always be used for comparison purposes, is about 48% for Series A, whereas the return for Series B is only 25. On the downside, note that the common gets nothing. Series A gets half the investment back, and Series B gets all their investment back. That's a lot of downside to weather while still getting your money back. This is why post-money value indications, most recent preferred stock price times all shares outstanding, used in the press releases, are not correct, as the value of preferred is almost never equal the value of common. This model is called the current value method of equity allocation, or CVM. This is one of the 3 methods outlined by the AICPA, FASB, and the Appraisal Foundation to value equity-like common stock in valuations for tax and financial reporting. It's commonly ignored as it reflects the value allocated to each class if the company was sold at the valuation date. Not a very common assumption. The current value method ignores the future, including additional interest or dividends to be accumulated before a future sale by the preferred or convertible notes, and ignores the requirements of additional funding if needed. In doing such, the method does not account for the risk related to time and the rights and preferences of the other classes of stock outstanding or to be outstanding. According to the guidance by the AICPA, consideration should be made for required rates of return for each class/investor, consideration for future conditions including the realization of the investment, like selling, IPO, new rounds of financing, and the multiple probable paths to that realization. Accordingly, other methods of equity allocation have been developed and are utilized more often. Before we look at those, let's first discuss some investment facts. Investment returns are directly correlated with risk, as greater levels of leverage create higher volatility. Accordingly, investments in debt receive lower returns than preferred, which receive lower returns than common stock. Valuing debt and equity is based on three pillars: cash flow, risk, and return. Valuation models utilize market returns to assess rates applicable to subject cash flows based on the relative risk. Equity allocation model number 2 is the OPM. The option pricing method of equity allocation utilizes the total value allocated at the end of each tranche to construct incremental call options using time to liquidation or sale and the volatility of publicly traded companies. The value of the tranche is the difference between the call options for that tranche less the call option for the next tranche. The value of the class of equity is the sum of the participation in each tranche. For tranche 4, the participation by Series A equals the incremental option value, 12, times the percentage participation from slide 20. 20 shares of Series A divided by 80 total shares participating in the tranche equals 20%. Unfortunately, the OPM is limited to valuations involving one liquidation preference. The PEVC guide indicates that the OPM does not consider future investments, and even EY's complex security leadership has presented on the sandwich problem. In my review of the OPM, I noticed the implied returns inherent in the different tranches. Here we showed 6% in tranche 1 and 12% in tranche 2. These returns are basically made up based on the time and the amount owed and then the incremental call option value. In other projects, I've seen tranche 1 implying 8%, while tranche 3 is 60%. Shouldn't there be a tighter range across different tranches of the same company? Who would invest in this company and command only a 6% return? Method 3 is guidance, not a specific method. The scenario-based method is a forward-looking method that considers one or more probable outcomes. How does each class participate in the future liquidation? What is the form of liquidation event, IPO, sale? Does that affect the liquidation rights of each class? It does not describe a specific model, though. For the last 20 years, I've worked with some of the largest private equity firms in the world, and I saw a consistency that was not being captured by the other allocation models. PE firms make investments with specific time horizons and projections to maximize value by the exit date. This includes, if necessary, adding additional equity or debt to achieve exit-level revenues or cash flows. This data is perfect for determining the implied rate of return on a deal using the discounted cash flow method. In most deals, the true cash flow picture and most of the return on investment will come from future liquidation or sale of the business. From this, I thought, why not examine the future sales proceeds and present value the amount paid out to each class of equity? It's simple to understand, and we already have a discount rate for the entire business and the expectation of future sales proceeds, i.e. the DCF terminal value. The discounted future proceeds method of equity allocation was created specifically for scenarios that include high growth, losses, and a big exit. In simple terms, the DFPM allocates value at the exit date to classes that are or will be outstanding at the exit date and calculates the present value of those proceeds based on the relative risk of each participation tranche. When done correctly, the weighted average discount rate applied across the classes should equal the discount rate used in the DCF method. The drive is to correlate the expectations of management, projections and exit date, market conditions, valuation date discount rates, and the changes in both with the value of each equity class. Let's examine this method using the capital structure and the total business value shown of $100. In the example, we determined that $250 would be the exit amount allocated to equity at the end of the same period used in the OPM. The exit date was 5 years. The change in value implies a 20% return over the 5 years if all cash flow came at the exit date. Allocating the value to each class using a CVM, current value method, at the exit date results in each class receiving $2.50 per share. In step 2, the proceeds are present valued using the discount rate appropriate for that tranche based on the total value allocated and the amount due in each tranche relative to the total value allocated and the amount allocated in the prior tranches. To complete the analysis, the final tranche is adjusted such that the total amount allocated after present value equals the total value determined, the $100. The final tranche can also be adjusted to equal recent rounds of preferred or other classes. This is called backsolving and is critical for calibration. If the required return for the final tranche is less than the prior tranche, or is very, very high relative to the prior tranche, the model inputs probably need to be rethought. When prepared properly, the correlation between DCF and DFPM should be clear in the comparison of the weighted average discount rate and the discount rate used in the DCF, as well as the total value allocated. In summary, the strong ties between time to exit, exit values, which imply exit revenue, cash flows, and multiples, and expectations on returns provide deep support for valuations today and calibration in the future. Final thoughts on the DFPM. In working with a model, consider that higher exit values drive higher returns for senior classes. Required returns reflect the risk of the value allocated in the tranche. And for the final tranche, the discount rate reflects the value being allocated in the final tranche, not all potential value above that amount. Finally, the DFPM can be used to model multiple different scenarios at the same exit date, but different terms might be driving the outcome. For instance, a sale versus IPO, where a sale, the dividends get converted, IPO, maybe they don't. The guidance has a name for this type of method. It's called the hybrid method. The hybrid method basically says that we'll combine an OPM and some other method, and then we'll compare and contrast. We agree with the idea, except for the use of an OPM in valuations involving multiple class preferred or complex option participation like threshold vesting. The DFPM addresses the requirements of the guidance, has been accepted by 3 of the Big 4 accounting firms, and provides multiple levels of correlation with the valuation of the business. This does not mean that the assumptions used come without opinion. In the following pages, I've presented data that I've used to determine Tranche 1 discount rates, as well as the incremental rates applicable to subsequent tranches. My hope is that new studies on first tranche discount rates and incremental rates, as well as implied discount rates on public companies, will become available and further support the inputs and assumptions used in the discount of future proceeds method of equity allocation. A quick thank you to Pepperdine for reviving the private capital markets report, by the way. I hope you find a masthead to continue funding this wonderful periodical. Risk, return, and cash flow are the 3 pillars of value presented elegantly in the Gordon Growth bond pricing model. We often refer to this as the value equation. Although simplistic in nature, the value equation provides a framework for the inherent relationship between these pillars and is a good place to start a conversation. In addition to my experiences listed, I developed a platform to create capitalization tables, model the waterfalls today and in the future, compare class returns using different structures and different holding periods, and soon determine the value of each class using multiple methods and scenarios. Keep on the lookout for CapUcalc and join me in better understanding the nuances of convertible notes and preferred stock. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please reach out to me with any questions, comments, or if you'd like to see new models on CapUcalc.